Welcome to Evergreen 3.13 upgrade. We will be today covering all of the different features that will be coming in our newest upgrade to Evergreen 3.13. And so today that means that we will be looking at who was affected by this, what an upgrade really means for those of you who may be going through your first one with us, and when this is going to be happening. We will go through an overview of major changes that you can expect, and we'll also be doing live demos of those changes as we go. Now, with all upgrades, there are a lot of kind of little things that come as part of the upgrade, small bug fixes and patches and things like that. We may not cover all of that. And so what I would encourage you to do is find the Evergreen release notes and feel free to kind of run through those as you prepare for the upgrade. The more prepared you are, the more smoothly everything will go in your library. And let me pull up those release notes for you right now. Now, I will put this in the chat. And this is a link to the 3.13 release notes. However, because we are going from 3.11 to 3.13, I'm also going to share the 3.12 release notes for you because some of our updates are from the actual 3.12 upgrade, which we did not participate in directly, but obviously everything that was in 3.12 will be coming in as part of this upgrade to 3.13. So I do encourage you to explore those between now and when our upgrade goes live. But we will be going over kind of the major things today. So the first question is who, what, and when. Who is going to be affected by this, what this is, and when it's going to happen. So who does this affect? Basically, it affects everybody who works with Evergreen, but some of the big updates this year are going to impact acquisition staff. Staff who run reports, catalogers, and then it's going to affect circulators in that the interface for searching for materials has updated a bit, so we'll talk about those interface changes. And then there will be some administration change in terms of our password project, so changes to how passwords are updated. So we'll talk about that a little bit as well. So really, if you look at this list, this is everyone who works in your library. But just to kind of really think about who is going to be most impacted, your acquisition staff are probably going to be the strongest impacted by this, followed or almost tied with those who run reports. After that, the biggest changes do come in cataloging. Circulation changes are primarily aesthetic, though there are a couple of sort of quality of life updates that I'm going to point out. And then administrators will be impacted in as much as password policy is being updated as part of this upgrade. And so SLAMs may have a little bit of a, a couple of weeks where passwords are a little bit rough on some of your staff. So we'll talk about what that means. And I apologize, Google has been incredibly finicky with me lately, and it is liable to crash out of nowhere. That's what just happened here. So we know who this is going to affect, but what can they expect when it happens? The first thing to know is that the system will go offline. So we will be conducting the upgrade over the course of a weekend. So when you leave on Friday, you will shut down Evergreen. And then if your library is open over the weekend, when you open it up on Saturday or Sunday, it will be in offline mode. So any transactions that you run over the course of that weekend will be offline. We will be having an offline training webinar next week. We'll actually be doing 2 different sessions of it to allow as many staff as possible to attend live, although of course the recordings will be available, but if you attend live, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions. So I wanted to make sure that that opportunity was open to as many staff as it really could be. So we will have two separate sessions for that next week on, I believe, the 16th and 18th. Those dates are listed in the knowledge books on our training landing page, and there's a registration form in there. I will post the links up in Basecamp as well, so you don't have to register to attend, but if you want to make sure that you get email reminders and make sure that you don't miss it, I do encourage you to register beforehand. So the system will go offline, which means that transactions will have to be conducted within offline mode over the course of that weekend. Just so that you are aware, while systems are offline, anything that you use SIP for will continue to function, which means your patrons will still be able to access your online resources. The only SIP connection that will not function while you are offline are any self-check machines that you have. So you will not be able to, your patrons will not be able to utilize self-check while we're offline. So just make sure that you are prepared for that, that you have signage or whatever you may need to do ready to go for that weekend. Also be aware that any reports that you have scheduled while the system is offline will not run. So if you do have recurring reports, this year the upgrade does happen the last weekend of a month. And I know most of the time recurring reports are going to happen on the first of the month. But if you do have any that happen, say on the 31st or anything like that, I do recommend that you get that you set up any reports, and I think I have. They, as Benjamin has said in the chat, those will recover when we go back online, but just be prepared that they're not going to necessarily run on the date you normally would. So make sure that you know what reports are scheduled to run, and if there are any that are scheduled for that weekend that you would like to have run prior to going offline, make sure you go ahead and get that set up. Otherwise, just be prepared for a slight delay on those reports. Also, be aware that notices will not go out to patrons while the system is offline. So if there are overdue notices that are scheduled to go out or anything like that, just be prepared that those will not be going out over the course of those couple of days. So the big thing to be aware of is that you'll be offline. Of course, also, when you come back online, there will be some changes, and that's what we're going to be talking about through the rest of this presentation. But also, before we get into that, this webinar is scheduled to run Friday, November 1st through Sunday, November 3rd. So basically, when you shut down on Friday, November 1st, you'll be shutting down regular Evergreen. If you are working over the weekend, you will be working in offline mode over the weekend. We do usually expect upgrades to be complete by Sunday afternoon or evening. There's a possibility it may run into Monday morning, so be prepared for that. We will send out updates about the status of everything. So keep an eye on Basecamp. And first thing Monday morning, if everything went smoothly, you should be pulling up Evergreen 3.13, and that should happen automatically. You don't need to download anything. It's all web-based, so as you just go to your normal login for Evergreen, and it's going to kick you right into 3.13. If there is any sort of holdup, that means that Monday morning we are not ready to be live with it. We will certainly let you know on Basecamp, but it is almost always ready by the end of that weekend. So just keep an eye on Basecamp is the biggest advice for that. So November 1st through November 3rd, we will be offline. And when we come back, this is what you'll see. So the biggest changes that are coming in 3.13, there is a new reporter. And I did a webinar for this a couple of weeks ago, just kind of taking everyone on a tour of the reporter. If you are interested in watching the recording of that, it is up on YouTube. The biggest changes with the reporter are in the interface itself. It now has been what we call angularized, so it more closely matches the rest of the Evergreen interface. The functionality of reports is not terribly different, but there are some kind of quality of life improvements. We'll talk about those a bit today, but if you really want to go into a little more detail, you can go back and review that webinar that I did a couple weeks ago. It is also available in Next, so if you'd like to play around on your library's Next server, that is an option. At this time, because we can't really run reports in Next, I still have a couple lingering questions about what will happen with like recurring reports and things like that. So that'll be one of the first things that I do once the upgrade is complete, is test out the functionality of stuff like that once we're live. And if you are a regular report runner, please keep an eye on the Basecamp reports group, because I will be posting any updates that I find through that testing on that Basecamp group. And I encourage you to share any of your findings there as well. Some other big changes are just the search and navigation interface has been updated a bit. There were a lot of updates having to do with accessibility. So a lot of it is kind of under the hood, but you will see some of it, visually as well, in terms of button placement, some of the colors that you'll see. The order of a few different things has changed. For the most part, this isn't functionally that different, but it will look different. So it may take some people a little time to get used to. If you spend a lot of time in Evergreen, then some of the things that you are used to seeing in certain places may be different, and that could take a little bit of getting used to, but we'll go through that today and hopefully give you an idea of what to expect. Now, I did mention before that acquisitions is one of the biggest changes. Last year, when we upgraded to 3.11, about half of the acquisitions workflow was upgraded to an Angular format. This year, the other half has been upgraded. And primarily what that means is invoices, though there have been a couple of other changes as well. And we will go through those today. There is some interesting stuff you can do with shelving locations in your searching though. And so we'll talk about that today. I think that this has the opportunity to really improve some search functionality and help staff to kind of narrow down their searches more effectively. And then I did mention that catalogers will see some changes. The big changes they'll see are with the MARC editor. There are a couple of other things that I'll point out as well, but the MARC editor itself has been overhauled. A lot of it is an aesthetic change, but there are some functional changes as well that we'll talk about. And then, of course, the big thing that's going to affect everyone are the password updates, and we will certainly talk about that quite a bit. So I do encourage you, as we're going through this, if you'd like to see something in more detail, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. I'm happy to address them as we go. If you have a very long and detailed question and you want to make sure that I don't get too far ahead of you before you finish typing it out, just raise your hand. If I see somebody's hand raised, then I'll kind of pause for a moment to give you a chance to ask your question. If we don't get to your question in the course of things, I will hopefully have plenty of time left at the end for questions. I did set this for 2 hours. I don't think I have 2 hours worth of content. So I'm hoping that there's plenty of time for questions near the end. And then of course you can always follow up with me on Basecamp or directly. So let's start taking a look at some of these changes. We're going to start with acquisitions. The biggest change, as I said, is that the remaining portions of the acquisition workflow has been rewritten in Angular. Primarily what that means is that what you'll see in the interface for acquisitions now better matches with what you see in the rest of Evergreen. So you'll see grids that you can sort and filter and things like that. The invoices are the big one, although the Z3950 has also been updated and the claims interface has been angularized. On the back end, there's also been some changes to the secure file transfer protocol. So those of you using EDI, you may remember that over the course of this past year, we've had a couple of incidents where EDI messages haven't been going through properly, and they were all addressed, but we had a couple of different times where I think Ingram was the major blocking point, and it had to do with how how files were being transferred via EDI. Evergreen has worked out those bugs, and so hopefully we are not going to. I think it's been several months since we've seen anything with that, but hopefully any underlying issues in Evergreen have been addressed through this through this update, so we don't have any worries in the future about anything with that. So EDI messages, you shouldn't notice any difference because hopefully they're working correctly now and will continue to do so, but just know that under the hood there have been some improvements to that secure file transfer. Another thing that I think is pretty exciting that affects both acquisitions and cataloging is background imports. When you upload a file of MARC records, you can now have that upload run in the background while you move on to other things and get an email that lets you know when it's done. So I'll show you that in action in a few minutes. The interface now allows admin users to edit and manage fiscal year calendars, and that's actually seems like a small thing, but it's a huge quality of life improvement because that has been a bit of a headache for some people in the past. So being able to actually work with those fiscal year calendars and edit them, I think will be a nice improvement for those of you who work with acquisitions. However, we did discover just a couple of days ago that there is a bug in 3.13 that impacts your ability to cancel line items. So if you have placed a purchase order and that order is currently on order, that's its status, and you have to cancel a line item from that, that cancellation fails. So a bug has been put in. It has the highest priority that a bug can have that's not security related. So hopefully somebody will get to work on a patch for this quickly. And once that patch has been fully tested, then we'll be able to add it. But just be aware that you may have some issues with canceling line items after the upgrade for a little while. And so it may be a situation where you'll have to kind of keep purchase orders open until you're able to cancel them. I believe deletions are still possible, so you may be able to delete items. I have not fully tested that, though. Like I said, we just discovered this bug a couple of days ago. So just be aware of that, and I will keep acquisitions folks posted on what's going on with that bug. So let's take a look at some of this stuff live. So I'm going to go on into our next environment. And as I said, you are welcome to play around with this between now and the actual upgrade by just going into your library's next server. I am going to go ahead into this existing purchased order in Next, and I'm going to show you the new invoice interface. So basically at this point I have an on order purchase order, and I'm going to go ahead and create an invoice for it. So I have two options. I can create an invoice or create an invoice with prices. So if I do create an invoice this way, no prices will come over and I'll have to fill those in manually. If I do it this way, it's going to take the prices that are in the PO. Those we all know if we work with acquisitions, those may or may not actually match with what you end up getting billed. But I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to choose create invoice with PO prices, and it's working on it. And so this is the new invoice interface. You can see that a lot of the content of it is very similar to the old interface, but it's obviously been updated to be just a little bit more in line with what we see in the rest of Evergreen. We do have a lot of the same options up here that we had prior to this. So if I were to create this invoice, one of the things I'd want to do is put in my vendor invoice ID, my payment method, all of that kind of information. But it's all up here kind of nicely laid out for me. If I come down to the invoice itself, you can see that this now looks like my purchase order. So, the older version of the invoices were much more kind of bare bones. I now have the same sort of color scheme. I have the same ability to kind of select and conduct actions on various line items. I have the ability to expand and see where my, see my shelving location and fund and all that kind of stuff for the line items. And then, of course, I have my invoice information here. How many have I been invoiced? How many have I paid for? Total amount billed, all of that kind of stuff. I can remove items from this invoice by detaching them. I can also come up here to my actions menu, and I can mark things received from this point. basically I can work with this just as I did an older invoice, but I have a little bit more functionality within the invoice interface itself, and of course the aesthetics of it have changed. If I wanted to search for items to add to the invoice, I have that ability, and now the search looks more like the regular acquisition search that I'm used to since 3.11. And then I now have the ability to batch receive items in the invoice itself, which I think is, I believe that is a new feature. And then because, of course, I'm angularized, and so everything is in this kind of familiar grid, I now have a lot of filter and sort options that I did not necessarily have before. So if you do have a very long invoice and you're trying to find particular items in it, this can be incredibly useful. And I have the same navigation stuff that I have in other grids as well, allowing me to change the number of rows visible, allowing me to kind of navigate between those rows. This invoice, of course, is only 5 or 6 items. So it's easy to kind of see everything, but if it was much larger, then these navigation tools would be very helpful. And then I also have the ability to go back and see things like what was the import queue where this purchase order was originally created. I can go back and check things directly in the catalog. I can see information about patron requests for this item. So it's just kind of a nice taking the invoicing to the next stage of development. And I think this is going to be a good step forward for acquisitions. Any questions about the invoices? Anything anybody would like to see in more detail? All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and move on. But if you do have questions about acquisitions, whether it's invoicing or anything else, please feel free to put them in chat. We will take a closer look at Z3950 and at the background imports when we talk about cataloging, just because those changes affect both of these workflows. And we're going to talk about cataloging next, so we'll get right into it. With cataloging, the biggest change is that the enhanced mark editor has been completely overhauled. Functionally, it still allows you to edit a mark record, but it does, I believe, make it a little bit easier. And there are some nice accessibility related upgrades. And then there are some things that just kind of make it, some of the things that I disliked about working with the mark editor before involved the ability to kind of work with new lines. I usually would go into the flat text editor if I wanted to add a new field. It's now much easier to both add, edit, and manage the order of new fields that you put into your mark record. As I said, background imports are now an option, and I will show you how you can make those work. And the Z3950 interface has been updated. So those are our big changes with cataloging. So it's all kind of at the bibliographic level, but let's take a quick look at those. So if I am here in a mark record and I'm in the Mark Edit tab, you'll see that this looks very different than the earlier version of this tab. One of the things that has been added is simply that the color is different. Apparently there's quite a lot of feedback that the white on white was kind of had some eye strain issues for a lot of people. So they've added this gray background to kind of help mediate that a little bit. Some other things to be aware of is the use of combo boxes for fields and subfields, and then text boxes for values. And so that makes editing a lot easier. So if we come down here, we'll see that we have, we've always had some sort of individual boxes for different subfields, but each of these boxes is now both clearer and easier to edit. You can do a little bit more with adding and removing these subfields just a little bit more easily. We also have up here, we have this add drop-down menu that allows both adding new rows fairly easily. And you'll see that there are these little hints for keyboard shortcuts to do that. So Control Enter will now add a new field. And then you can also add or replace any of the, the 008, the 007, or the 006, again, with keyboard shortcuts. It is also just quite a lot easier to remove fields. So if I were to add a row, it's going to come down here to the bottom. Let's say I did that by accident. I could just click this X to easily remove it. Another thing that I'm pretty excited about, because this is the thing that really annoyed me about the Enhanced Mark Editor, is I now have the ability to very easily change the order of my fields. I can drag and drop with this little icon here. I can also use my keyboard to move it around. So just the up, down arrows on my keyboard will move a field. I have the ability to copy. So this little icon here, I can copy a field. So let's say I went up to my 650s. Let's say I wanted to make a new 650. I can hit that button and it's just going to copy it, and then I can edit it to in whatever way I need to make it the new field that I want, rather than just a direct copy of the old one. Let's see, there's a question in chat here. So Deborah asked if the Enhanced Editor has full right-click menus for all of the fixed fields. Let's take a look. So I actually don't even have to right-click. It's just a regular left-click. Will open up that menu. Is this what you were talking about, Deborah, these drop-downs? Yeah, I believe all of them. Date does not, but I believe everything, illustrations doesn't. So not everything does, but it does look like most of them do. This was
Also, maybe check the 001, 003, some of those numeric tags.
So it looks like we've got a couple that do not have the full drop downs. But I do believe that's more of them do than enough.
Yeah, those are a couple of known bugs.
Okay.
There's illustration and there are one or two others. I can't remember off the top of my head right now, but they definitely have an issue with the fixed fields, and they've been reported. I'm not sure at this point if the bugs will be included in the upgrade or if they're coming later, though.
So as of right now, with what we have in Next, no, not all of them have them, but we'll keep an eye out for that. But if the bug's been reported, then hopefully that is something that at some point in the future will be addressed. But yeah, it looks like you can't do anything with the 008 related to those drop downs. All right, so let's couple of the changes that I really wanted to point out. I'm just going to go ahead and do some edits to this record so you can kind of see them live. Let's add a new row. So I'm just going to come up here to my add dropdown and I'm going to add a row. So that adds a row down here at the bottom. I'm going to make it a 250 and I'm going to make it subfield A. And then I'm going to make this a first edition. And then, of course, I can move this up to where I would actually want it to show up in my record. Scroll a bit. There we go. So I'm able to add that fairly easily. I'm able to move it easily. And if I decided that I didn't want it, I can remove it simply by clicking on this X. And then, of course, this is not a new thing, but I do feel like it is a little bit more obvious now. I can come up here and click my undo button if I deleted that by accident, and it'll bring it right back up. What's nice about the undo and redo buttons now is that you have a count, how many edits you have made, so you know how many things could be undone, and then how many things have been redone from there as well. So that's useful. If I wanted to copy a field, I've already done that once. You just click on the little copy icon here. And let's say that I am fairly new to cataloging, or maybe I've been cataloging on and off for about 15 years and yet still find it mystifying. I now have some help options, which I think are useful. So there is a help button. Oh, sorry, there's another. So Deborah is asking if there is anywhere in admin settings to automatically save mark tags in numerical order, because this is common with other ILSs. I am not personally familiar with that. Maybe Will is aware of something. Well, he
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
And I also am not sure how that would work when you take the flat text editor into consideration, when you can just kind of willy-nilly swap the order of the fields.
So not an option right now. Who knows what the future will hold with that, but it is at least much easier now, I think, to change the order around. Let's see. Benjamin said something about this not wanting to sort the 6XX and O2Os specifically. So that may be one of the reasons that well, we'll keep an eye out. Who knows what the future holds. One thing that I do think is helpful here is the help button. If I click on this help button, it's going to give me all my keyboard shortcuts. So I can see, what are some of the quick ways that I can do some of this work. And then also, if I come down here to some of my standard fields, I do get some information about how to format those fields, which indicators to use for different things, which subfields to use for different things. So I've got that for the 100, I've got that for the 245, for my addition statement, my 250, 264, 300, whole lot of them, which I think is really helpful. If you have somebody who maybe is not as versed in cataloging rules, having this, being able to toggle this help on so that you're not, flipping back and forth in tabs and things like that, I think is helpful. So I'm pretty excited about that personally as a non-cataloger who sometimes has to go in and work with cataloging. All right, any questions about the enhanced mark editor? The flat text editor is still here, still functionally the same as it has been. You just have this sort of gray frame around it. But the enhanced mark editor is, maybe under the inner workings of it haven't changed significantly, but there are some surface level things that I do think makes it a little easier to work with. All right, so let's talk about our other two big cataloging changes. And those are the background imports and the Z3950 interface. So first, let's go into the upload interface. I'm just going to come back in here to Evergreen, and I'm going to go under the mark batch import export here. Yeah. And so this is, the same importer that we have used in the past, but it is now, you'll notice if you scroll down here to the bottom, you now have this option to request a background import. So if you're uploading a fairly large file that may take a little while, rather than kind of having to keep it up and running in a tab, when maybe you're working in another tab and so you're not sitting there just staring at it, but still you have to keep it up in that tab. Instead of doing that now, you can request a background import by checking this box and then put in your email address. And then once that import is complete, you'll get an email notification. You can also come in here and check on the status of your background imports by clicking on the background imports link up here at the top. So this is new. You can come in here and you'd be able to see any background imports that are currently running. And I can go ahead and set one up real quick. So we can kind of see what that looks like in the background imports tab. So I don't know that any of my files are large enough to really warrant a background import, but so that's going. I'm going to go into background and you'll see just, when did I request it? It's not complete yet. The workstation it was requested on, notification, email, all this kind of information is here. So I'm, can kind of keep track of it while I wait for it to go. And then I'll get that email once it's complete. So that's just like kind of a small, but I think fairly mighty quality of life improvement. The other thing that I wanted to show you was the Z3950 interface. Functionally speaking, this is very similar to how it's always worked, but it has been kind of given a facelift. So we're going to come into import record from Z3950. You'll see right away that it does look a little different. Services and credentials is on the left now, whereas previously it was on the right. I'll just do a quick search. And come down here and you'll see that, my search results are not a huge visual difference, but a little bit. For the most part, there's not a whole lot that's different here. One thing that I did want to point out is that if I go into edit, then import, that I have the new version of the enhanced mark editor is in here as well. So I'm able to utilize all of those tools that are available in the new version of the editor are also coming through within Z3950. So again, easy to move things up and down, easy to duplicate or delete fields. And I do have the help option, which is useful in this case. And then I do have the keyboard shortcuts to quickly add rows and things like that. So just taking those improvements from the enhanced mark editor and applying them within the context of Z3950. So functionally speaking, Z3950 does what it's always done and does it in the way it's always done it, but you now have kind of a different frame for looking at it. All right. And that's basically what we can expect to be changes in cataloging. Are there any questions about any of these cataloging updates? All right, well, again, if you do find that you have some questions, feel free to throw them in to, so Pat Hosmer has asked, will the author TCN and UPC queries going to be added? Is this within Z3950? Will those be added to this search?
The queries are based on which service you select.
Yeah, so author is in here, but as Will said, it depends on where you're searching. So there may be some that may not have author.
So maybe click also on local. Yeah.
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 So if I do click local, I do have a TCN option here and a UPC option.
And we should have a list in the knowledge book as well of which services have which fields.
And it's nice here that you can see that if it's only coming from our catalog, you actually see that now listed.
Yeah. And it looks like also if it's only available, if it's not in our catalog and it's in the other service you're searching, it's going to show that. If I add a couple others, Milwaukee's not a good one for that. Yeah, you can see now like LCCN is used by both Colorado and Harris County. That's a nice feature that I actually had not like actively noted prior to this. All right, any other questions about cataloging? Well, let's go on and talk about circulation, but if you do have cataloging questions, feel free to bring them up. If we don't get to them in the course of things, we will certainly come back around and address them at the end when we have kind of open question time. So we're going to talk about circulation. And as I said at the beginning, a lot of the circulation changes aren't really workflow changes. They're not really functional changes, but there are a lot of kind of little quality of life things that I think people have been asking for a while that have been incorporated. A lot of this has to do with holds, but just a couple that I wanted to highlight. So the pull lists now include the publication year. So let's take a look at what that looks like. I'm just cleaning up my tabs here a little bit. So if I go into a pull list for my library, I now have the ability to come up here to my my grid options. And one thing you'll notice throughout the interface is that when you're adding or removing fields from your grid, you now have these checkboxes rather than that little sort of green check mark or orange X that it had before. So a little bit easier to kind of tell the difference, especially from an accessibility perspective. The contrast, of course, wasn't as high as it needed to be on those old icons. So that you'll see throughout Evergreen. In this case, I can come down here within this list and I can add publication year. And so that's going to be useful if you have, a book that maybe there are multiple books with the same title, or maybe there are just lots of different editions and you're looking, you want to make sure that what you're grabbing off of the shelf matches the one that's actually being requested. And so you now have the ability to add publication year to your pull list. And of course, that'll be available in the printout as well. So a small thing, but one that I think people have been asking for a while. Some other things to be aware of is that hold grids now throughout Evergreen will print the hold status column. So depending on which hold grid you were looking at, whether it was in the patrons account or on the bib record or pull lists, different ones had different ways that they showed the hold status. I guess pull list that wouldn't make sense for, but different ones had different way that they showed the hold status, especially when you printed. Some of them would have the ID number, the database ID number for the hold status, rather than the name of it. Some of them would actually just come up blank. And so now throughout Evergreen, it consistently will show the name of the hold status when you print. So, again, one of those things that probably won't make a huge difference overall, but may be a nice improvement for those who work within hold lists quite a lot. You now have Evergreen now keeps track of the staff user that cancels holds. So let's take a look at that. If I go into a patron's hold list and I go into her recently canceled hold, and this is a fake patron, so don't worry. I can now come up here to my grid management menu, and I can find, oh, and this one is actually one that has not yet had the checkbox update. And I can find, there are just so very many options within here, and they're not all 100% in alphabetical order. Hold canceling staff. So I can turn that on, and then I can see who canceled this hold. So that's going to be useful if you have a situation, where a patron comes in asking for the status of a hold, and you see that hold has been canceled. You can figure out who canceled it. So you may be able to sort of trace back why it was canceled. And there may be a reason. Maybe the patron did call and say, I want to cancel this hold, and they've forgotten about it, but the staff remembers. There may be a situation where, the hold was canceled because it was hopeless, or because of, some situation having to do with transits. So Jeremy, I wish that list was in alphabetical order too. I do not love scrolling through those lists. But now you can basically come in and sort of trace back when something was canceled, as well as who canceled it, and that can be helpful for kind of figuring out, what may have happened in a situation where our hold was canceled and there are questions about it. So a small thing, but can be useful in situations. Another option that is new is that you now have the ability to have the privilege expiration date column show up in your group member details table. So, if I have a family group where they've all kind of been grouped together, and the parent comes in and says, when are my kids' accounts going to expire? Or my account has expired. Can I check to make sure my kids' accounts haven't expired too? That's now easy to do directly from that group member details table, rather than having to go out to each individual account within the group to check that individually. So if I come into this account and I take a look at the group member details, I have one other person in this group. I can come up to my grid management menu, and I can find privilege expiration date. It's a much shorter list. It was much easier. And then that can show up in this grid. So it's very easy now for me to check the expiration dates of a whole family group. And of course, just like with any grid columns like this, I can save it so that that's always there. You also, and this kind of feeds into something that we're going to see when we look at how the search function is now, is that you now have the ability to filter your hold pull list by shelving location, which is, I think, fantastic, and also by pickup library. So if I go into a hold pull list, we already looked at this briefly in a different context, but up here at the top, I now have the option to add these filters for pickup library and shelving locations. So, if you wanted to kind of go out and pick up all of your local holds first, you could filter your pull list to just, your branch. And then you can go out and take care of those holds, and then do your resource sharing holds separately. Or you can come in here to shelving location, and if you wanted to maybe print separate lists for each shelving location within your library, now you can filter to have just a list for, adult audiobooks. And so I can apply that. And then there may not be any adult audiobooks on this particular pull list. And then I can also do multiple shelving locations at once. So I could do all of my audiobooks at one time, and I could go out there and pull that. I could do all of my fiction, whether it's adult fiction, mystery, anything like that. And I can sort of do everything within the same area of the library at once. I know when I used to do ILL at a really large public library, and I would have randomly there'd be a little section of juvenile books, and I'd have to go all the way downstairs to get those before coming back up and finishing my nonfiction. Much easier now to be able to pull individual shelving locations and have pull lists for those shelving locations. Depending on the size of your library and what your workflow is, this can be very useful. So just kind of some new features available within that hold pull list. So circulation doesn't see very many changes. It's mostly just new features within existing functions. But I do think that they add a lot of sort of improvements to efficiency throughout. Now, before we get into reports, I did want to just jump into actually, you know what, let's do reports first, and then we'll come back to passwords. I just think that passwords may bring up a lot of questions. So let's go into reports first, and then we'll kind of jump backwards. I did this alphabetically, and I didn't think about the fact that passwords would be best at the end. So we're going to talk about reports. Reports have been upgraded to match the Angular interface that we see throughout the rest of Evergreen, which basically means that you now have the ability to sort and filter columns within reports in a way that you could not before. And then you have that column management that we see throughout Evergreen, where you can sort of remove fields that you don't want to be seen. You can add columns that would give you more context for something. You have a lot of control over what your view of your reports folders looks like. A feature that I really like is that I can now see a list of all of the reports that are being run off of a specific template and all of the output that has come from a specific report. And so that's a really nice feature, especially if you have kind of shared reports within your library and you want to see, who all is running off of what templates and things like that. You now have that ability to do that. My favorite thing within the reports upgrade is that I can now look separately, sort my columns and my rows, which means that I can have my first column be barcode, but I can sort by owning library so that all of everything owned by a specific branch is grouped together, even though my first column isn't owning library anymore. In the old reporter, whatever your first column was, that's what your output was sorted by. So if your first column was something like owning library, you'd have all of your library, all of the items within a specific library would be grouped together. But if your first column was barcode, then there was absolutely no discernible order whatsoever, because the fact that the barcodes were in numerical order is somewhat meaningless. So I really like that you now have the control to do these two separately. This was something that was available in the simple reporter previously. And every once in a while, I'd have a request for a report that really needed to have the column order in a specific way, but sort separately from that. And so sometimes I'd have to go into the simple reporter to do that. But you now have that functionality within the traditional reporter, which gives you sort of the power of the traditional reporter with this ability to manipulate what the data looks like coming out. That was only available in the simple reporter before. So I'm very excited about this one. Also, the other thing, and it's probably a tie, what I'm most excited about, but nullability has been simplified significantly within the reporter. So those of you who have been nervous to try nullability in the past, it's a lot easier now than it was. So we'll take a look at that. Let's go on into the reporter. So you'll see right away that it does look very different. Your folders and everything like that are just kind of a different interface than we had before. Functionally, it is still essentially the same in terms of you have your stuff up here at the top and then folders that have been shared that you can access down here at the bottom. Within that, you still have that sort of three part layout where you have templates, reports, and output. So that has not changed. You do still have to make templates. Those templates still are not editable. If you need to make changes, you still have to clone and create a new template. And then you would run the reports off of those templates. Reports themselves, it is a little bit easier to edit a report than it was before. So that's a nice upgrade. And then, of course, your output is still out here. There is a search function. There was a search function before. I don't think that the reality is that it has changed that much, but I do think that it is a little bit easier now, maybe just because it looks easier. I don't think anything has actually changed in how that search is happening, but I find it to be a little bit more intuitive to use. Let's go and take a look at some templates. So if I am in a template folder, I now have these buttons up here at the top, and that has taken the place of the drop-down menu. And this allows me to create a new template from here, to make changes to the folder, create new subfolders, change the sharing settings, things like that. Now, if I want to actually do anything with these, with the templates themselves, I can select one and I can come up here to my action menu, and then I can clone, delete, move, run a new report. And then this is that feature I was talking about where I can get a list of all of the reports that have run off of this particular template. And I don't believe I have any off of that template. I think that was just a test on templates themselves. I should have some out of this one. So I can get a report list, and this will tell me all of the reports that have run off of this single template. Another thing that is nice is that I can double click on a template and run a report off of it. It brings me straight into, oh, I'm sorry, that was my reports. I can double click on the template and it brings me straight into setting up a report. So, I don't have to select and then go up to the drop-down menu and then click submit. I can just double click on the template that I'd like to run a report off of. When running a report, I now have this kind of wizard layout rather than that sort of single page that I had before. So I can start by looking at, these are all the display fields. I cannot do anything to them at this point because that's done at the template level and I'm currently at the report level. But I can at least see very clearly what my display fields are going to be and how they've been transformed. So, if something is a date rather than a timestamp or something like that, I can see that. Within my filters tab, I can go ahead and define my filters that were set up in the report. And you'll see with things like this where I'm choosing org units rather than having that very tiny box and I have maybe being able to see 3 org units at a time, I now have the full list. I can expand, so I'm seeing all of my systems. I can come down here and find a specific system, expand it, and see all of the branches within that system. Just like before, with most situations, you're going to want to choose the branch level, not the system level, but you now do have just that ability to very quickly get to the correct system and then expand out and see all of your branches without having to scroll through a tiny box and then clicking on them and hitting add and hoping you've gotten all of them. So I think that that's a nice improvement. Of course, you still have your calendar widget for your dates, so that remains similar to what it has been in the past. For some of these, like this is a shelving location, I have the ability to I could come up here to my system level and include descendants, and then I'm going to be able to see um, all of the shelving locations that are available at that system level. Let's see. I don't have any in here that have the ability to choose a relative date, so I can't set that. But you do just have kind of a little bit more clearly defined choices when setting up your filtered definitions. And then your layout and scheduling is similar to what it was before. It is now a lot harder to miss choosing which folder something's going to be saved to, which is, I think, useful because I forget to do that at least a third of the time when I'm running reports and have to go back up and do it after trying to save. Your output options are basically the same as they were before. You do have this calculate grouping subtotals option. I have not played with this a lot yet, so I'm not sure exactly what that's going to do, but I'm looking forward to testing it once we're live. And then, of course, I have all of my same scheduling options available. And of course, I have this wonderful little box that tells me everything I've done wrong before I can save. So while the functionality of what's happening when you run a report isn't necessarily easier than it has been in the past, you still have to choose, your core sources and things like that, and it can still be a little bit tricky. You have a little bit more in terms of guardrails throughout the process to kind of guide you through some of the process. So hopefully that can give you a chance to maybe turn a little bit more of your focus to determining things like linking to subtables and stuff like that, because you're not spending quite as much brain space on the more finicky aspects of setting the reports up. That's my hope anyway. I will tell you that when I first attempted to work with the new reporter, I was not thrilled. But the more I've worked with it, the more that I have liked it. I think that there have been several small improvements that have actually made a pretty big impact on setting reports up to run and things like that. So I'm hoping that others feel the same way. I do encourage you to go into Next, and if you run reports regularly, go ahead and familiarize yourself with the interface, with some of the new things that are available. And then once we're live, definitely run some test reports to kind of get familiar with the whole process. I did want to show you one thing, and that is nullability. So I am just going to clone an existing report. It does not matter what I'm cloning. And then basically nullability now, one thing I don't like about it is that it is these checkboxes over here in my source path. It is not super clear that that's what is happening. If I do hover over the checkbox, I get this little message that tells me that I'm basically requiring an inner join. If you don't know that that's what nullability means, then that may not make a lot of sense to you. That is the only indication that I am adding nullability by checking that box. But that is how you add nullability, is you simply check that box. And then when you add a field from that box, you get this down here, you get this note that says required. And that's what that means, is that you have basically just applied nullability to this particular field. Because nullability at its heart is basically saying don't include rows that have this field blank. And so when it says that it's required, that's what it's saying. So if you are not really familiar with the inner workings of nullability and what's happening, some of these hints may not be very helpful. But basically, when you select this box, you are requiring an inner join. And when you select a field from a table that has that box checked, that means that field is required in your output. It will not be blank in your output. So it is significantly simplified in terms of adding it. It is still confusing in terms of what you're doing when you add it. But there are hints now that there weren't before. So I do think that that is an improvement, but there is still a learning curve. And Benjamin has clarified a little bit about what inner joins mean. And so if you would like to get into a nice discussion about all of the different ways that you can join tables, we will be doing a deep dive into the new reporter at some point over the winter, once people have had a chance to kind of play with it and develop some questions. And at that time, we can talk in great detail about nullability if anyone wants to. If you do have questions about it now, we can certainly ask them now and get into them. Yes, I think that's a great title for that webinar. Everything you didn't want to know about the database relational model. That will definitely, lots of people will sign up for that. So, I think that some users that have found reports difficult in the past may not find them significantly more usable now than they have been before. But those of you who do work with reports regularly will probably find that there have been a number of small improvements that do improve the efficiency of working with reports, that do make them a little bit easier to work with. And my hope is that for those of you who have found reports difficult in the past, by simplifying some of the interface, there's a little bit less of that part of the learning curve has been flattened a bit, which may make it easier to dive into some of the trickier aspects. So that's my hope. We'll see what reality holds, but that's what I'm hoping happens as a result of these upgrades. I do think that it is an improvement, and I'm pretty excited about what this will do for making reports just that much more usable. All right, any questions about the reporter? As I said, we'll definitely do a deep dive on this sometime in the next few months once people have had a chance to kind of get used to it, and definitely go into Next and play around a bit before the upgrade. But if you have questions now, we can certainly discuss them.
Have to find a backend that's set as up.
All right. Well, let's talk about the search interface and the OPAC, and then we'll move back to passwords. So one of the big changes just aesthetically is to the search interface. So let's take a look at what this update looks like. If I come into my catalog search, you'll see that the parts of the interface that we're used to are still here. You still have these tabs for the different types of searching. You still have our 3-dot menu to add different filters. You still have the ability to add multiple lines. All of this is still here. One thing that is new, and we'll talk about this in more detail in just a few minutes, is this library group or shelving location group. This does require some administrative work on the back end to set up these groups. But once they're set up, that allows you to basically search within kind of a cohort. So you can create a library group that is all of your branches, or that's only a couple of your branches. So, if you're in a very large system and you want to be able to search the 3 branches closest to you, you can create a library group of that sort. You can create shelving location groups. So you're looking in all adult fiction. So you're looking at adult fiction as well as adult Christian fiction and adult mystery fiction and adult science fiction. You can group all of those together. So you can do a search within that confine. So none of your nonfiction books are going to come up in that search, but you're not necessarily limited by genre. As I said, this does have to be set up on the back end, so there's not it doesn't just happen automatically. But if you have some specific ways that you want to be able to limit your searching, this is something that you can kind of set up to use. So that's the biggest thing that will change as part of your search interface. Let me hide these filters so we don't take up quite as much space. If I conduct a search, I'm not going to add those filters right now, or those groups right now. You will see that there is a slight change to the way it looks. The information that is here is basically the same, but my grid for where items within this record are located is a little different. I think it's probably was changed as part of accessibility updates. I do think it is a little bit easier to read, but that's your biggest change really at this point is simply what it looks like. None of your facets over here have changed or anything like that. Your ability to work with the record is the same. If you click on the title, it's going to take you into the record. If you click on place hold, you'll be able to place a hold. Now, if I were to add a shelving location group to this search, so I got 43 results before. And this has brought me down to 16. So these results now only include things that are shelved within a location that is listed within this previously set up group of adult fiction. So anything that may have been a nonfiction book before or something like that is no longer coming up. I believe that also this particular shelving location group does not include audiobooks, because before my first entry was an audiobook and now I'm just going straight to the book. So just a little minor demonstration of how those shelving location groups can be functional for you. So we looked at both the updated look and the library group and shelving locations group search. Another thing that I wanted to show you that is somewhat related to this is that you now have the ability to create a carousel from an item bucket or from the item status page. So, if you are pulling books for a display and you want to make a carousel that goes along with that display, you can scan each of those books in item status and you can create a carousel from that list. You could also create an item bucket of items that you want to go out and pull from the shelves for a display and then turn that bucket into a carousel. We'll look briefly at how you would do that. So if I go up here to an item bucket, I'm going to pull this bucket that I created. So this is just a bucket of a selection of different barcodes, and I can come up here to my bucket menu and I can choose create carousel from bucket. I would name my carousel and I would create it. And so now I've created that carousel from this bucket. I don't work with carousels enough to go in and make this look pretty on my OPAC or anything like that, but it is that easy to create a carousel this way. Create an automated carousel for on-order items. So probably the best way to do that is when you create your order. Onslow uses acquisitions. So when you upload your order, you have the ability within the upload interface to create a bucket from your uploads. Create that bucket from the upload, and then that bucket can be turned into a carousel. Or you may be able to also add to an existing bucket. So you can have a bucket of on-order items. And so when you do that upload, you can add items to that bucket, and then you can create a carousel from that bucket. That is how, off the top of my head, I would do it. There may be an easier way, but that is what I would probably at least experiment with first. If anybody has any suggestions for another way to create a carousel for on-order items, please feel free to share it. I'm not sure that I have done that myself, but it's definitely something that should be functional. So I would basically create that sort of. Oh, Llewellyn thinks that he has actually ported over the ability to do on-order carousels. So that may be something that is within Evergreen currently. How would they set that up, Llewellyn? All right, we'll look into that, but I would play around with turning uploads into buckets and then having a carousel from that sort of on order bucket that you dump your uploads into. I think you would probably have to regularly go in and clean up that bucket as things move out of the status of on order. You'd have to remove them from the bucket manually, though I don't think there's a way to automate that removal.
Yeah, it looks like I don't see that it got carried over to the new carousel versions.
Okay. Well, I don't know if that's something that we'd be able to look into doing. Probably not by the time this upgrade goes through, but at some point in the future, whether or not that would be an option for bringing back, and certainly discuss it. All right, so creating carousels, previously you could create them from record buckets, but you now have the ability to create them from item buckets or from the item status screen. So that does make it easier to sort of take a physical item that you can have in your hand and turn that into something that you can create a carousel with. And then just a small change, but one that is now available, is patrons now have the ability to edit their preferred name within the OPAC. So patrons can go into their own account within the OPAC and edit their preferred name themselves without having to come up to the desk to ask for staff to help them with that. So that is kind of the end of the standard upgrade stuff, but we're going to go back and talk about the password project. So the password updates, the biggest change that's coming is that passwords now expire after 90 days. So for the last few years, we have had notifications that have gone out to let people know that their password is out of date once it hits the 90-day mark. So you would get an email, and then you'd also get that lovely pink box at the top of Evergreen that showed you your password was out of date. And it looked like this. In this case, because I'm in Next, I'm actually getting a notification that my password has recently changed. But I also have the ability to change it directly within Next. And so this is a big change as well. So passwords expire after 90 days. What that means is that if your password is out of date, you will be locked out of Evergreen. Previously, you just kind of got annoying notifications. Now you will actually have to update it in order to log in. So over the course of the next couple of weeks, we'll be reaching out to anybody whose password may be out of date, just to let them know, when the upgrade comes, you would expect to be locked out. So if you want to go ahead and update your password now prior to the upgrade, we would recommend that. So we will be sending those notifications out to anyone that is out of date. Moving forward, you would then expect to have to update that password every 3 months in order to be able to continue to log in. We will continue sending out notifications prior to that 80-day expiration so that you know it's coming up. And we have simplified the ability to change your own password. Okay, and Llewellyn has said that you will get that red warning box probably 1 to 2 weeks before expiration. So as you are logging into your account, once we go live with the upgrade, you'll see a warning box letting you know that your password will be expiring in the near future. So that's something to keep keep an eye out for. Additionally, you'll continue to get emails and things like that. One of the things that will make this easier is that you do have the ability to change your own password. So when you get to the point where it is coming up on time, you will have this button to change the password. So you can click on that and you can set your own password. You know, the current process is that you have to log out of the staff client, log into the OPAC and change your password within the OPAC. Now you can change your password within the staff client directly. So that really simplifies that process. If you are not coming up on that expiration, so you don't have that button showing up, you can come up here to the hamburger menu up in the top right, and you have the ability to change your password from here. So you can change your password at any point in that 90-day cycle. You don't just have to wait until you're about to expire to be able to change it within the staff client. So, you know, if you have a situation where you forgot your password and you've had a reset email sent and you've reset it and now you want to, you know, change it again to something that you'll remember, you can come in here and do that at any point. Another thing to be aware of, though, is that there are now strength requirements. Prior to this, as long as you had a password, that was all we asked. Now we're going to ask that those passwords be a certain level of secure. So for non-admins, so, you know, circulators, circ leads, item catalogers and bib catalogers, as well as, you know, if you've got a reports account or volunteer accounts or anything like that. That must be an uppercase letter, a lowercase letter, a numeric character, and it needs to be at least 8 characters long. So a fairly standard set of requirements. Branch admins and system admins, because you do have the ability to make slightly larger changes to how your library functions. We have added an extra layer of security to those. In addition to those uppercase, lowercase, numeric requirements, we now also require a special character. So an exclamation point, an @ symbol, something like that. If you do have any questions about this, it is covered in the knowledge book. We'll have all of that. All of that has been added to the knowledge book, so you can kind of read that over before we get there. And as I said, we'll be reaching out to people with more information about this as we get closer to the upgrade. We do anticipate that this is going to be, you know, a big change for a lot of people. We know that we're going to probably have lots of tickets about changing passwords and things like that over the first few weeks after the upgrade. But we're hoping that with, you know, the last couple of years of password notifications and things like that, that people have gotten used to the idea of updating their passwords regularly. And that being able to change it yourself within the staff client will make a difference. Are there any questions about the password updates?
Can I offer one clarification?
Sure.
So when Samantha says locked out, what that means is actually that it will prompt you to set a new password when you're logging in, at the time you're logging in, before you can proceed. So it's not that you have to rely on somebody else to do something to let you in. It's just that you can't, you know, when you go in and you log in and it says, oh, your password's old, what do you want your new password to be? You have to set a password at that point in order to proceed. So one of the things I mentioned in the Basecamp discussion about this is if you have shared circulation accounts and you're not keeping those passwords up to date, whoever gets to it first is going to have to set a new password to use that account. So you need to make sure to communicate among your circ staff if something like that happens. Otherwise, you know, the person who's your branch administrator, your SLAM, or that sort of thing should be keeping that password up to date before it gets to that 90 days so you don't have sort of the scramble. Do we need to update our password if it does not follow the guidelines for the upgrade? No, it should only be when you set a new password that it is that those changes come into effect.
Now, when they are prompted to set a new password, you know, if their password is out of date at the upgrade and they come in and are prompted, will they have to enter their old password? Like, put in old password, new password, confirm, or will it just look like this where it's just new password and confirm new password?
It'll look
I
like this, but they'll have to log in normally. So they will have to put in their original password before they change it.
Okay.
and then it will kick them to this page.
Yeah, but if you're just changing your password like normal, it won't make you put in your original one after you've logged in.
Okay.
Same thing goes if you're registering a workstation. If you sort of go to Evergreen for the first time on a new machine and your password's out of date, it'll let you put in your old username and password, and then it will get you here. And once you've gone past here, then it will take you back to that register workstation screen.
It looks like Catherine asked, or has let us know that the strength requirement is based on the primary group and not the highest level. So if somebody is a SLAM and a bib cataloger, that sounds like that's going to make it so that their password requirements are based on what a cataloger's requirements would be, not a system admin. Is that what you have found, Catherine? Okay. Okay, so it looks like on Next we've only enacted one policy. So once it goes live, all of the sort of requirements will be enacted, but currently the only one is that base level one that doesn't require a special character.
So there's a function that will test how strong each requirement is. And once we've got multiple policies in there and we've got multiple permission groups with different policies, it should look through the list of all of your permission groups and choose the one that is the strongest.
Okay, good. Thank you for clarifying that. There's so much going on with the password changes. All right, any other questions about passwords, about anything else that we've covered, about any part of what the upgrade process looks like? We've got about half an hour left of the time that I set aside, so plenty of time for questions. So the upgrade will basically pull Evergreen down Friday, November 1st in the evening after all the libraries have closed. So then we will be working through the upgrade over that weekend, and by Monday, the 4th, we expect the upgrade to be live. So the password policy and everything else related to it should be live by Monday, November 4th. We'll be offline the 1st through the 3rd. We may come back online on the 3rd. Never sure exactly when it's going to be done. Just to be on the safe side, we expect it to be done by Monday morning, but it could be done earlier.
And to clarify, it's the evening of the 1st after business hours.
Yes, it will not be until your library has closed. So you will be in Evergreen 3.11 throughout the day, Friday the 1st, and then shut down, and then when you come in on Monday, be in 3.13.
Kelsey, to answer your question, if you are a system login access manager with the sort of elevated privileges, you are able in the staff client to change the CERC or CERC lead passwords, but you still cannot change the cataloger or administrator account passwords through that mechanism. Those users can log in through the My OPAC, or when they're in that splash screen, they can, or from the hamburger menu up top right, they can choose change my password, but you wouldn't be able to set the password, sort of just make it something. You can, though, send them a password, change password link from that account.
So this is the send password reset link, and that is live currently in 3.11. So that's what we use if somebody lets us know they've forgotten their password.
And that will go to whatever email address is on that account. So when we send out those, hey folks, you need to update your password emails, we're going to find out which emails are not functional. And some of you may get, if you're System Login Access Manager or you administer a couple of different accounts, you may get emails about several different accounts that need to be updated.
And I know that there are some systems where your email, your firewalls and everything will send these things to junk. So if you have a password, if you've generated a password reset link or something like that, and you're not seeing it, definitely check your junk folder, because that is
And
where those go.
we also realized yesterday that there's something that we need to fix with that notification email for password expiration. So Llewellyn is looking into that.
I would recommend in general, if your password is past 90 days at this point, that you update it before the upgrade, just to avoid kind of that extra step on the day the upgrade comes through. You're welcome to wait, but I would recommend getting it taken care of prior to it. All right, any other questions? Anything anyone would like to see in more detail? Or yes, Tamara, you have raised your hand. You're welcome to put it in chat. I might actually be able to unmute you. Let's see, Mary, while I work on unmuting Tamara, Mary has asked if we can use shelf check kiosk during the upgrade if they have the option to upload transactions once back online. No, you won't be able to do any self check while we are offline. So all of that, any circulation transactions would have to go through a circulator.
And I think if it's something that has kind of a protection mechanism that if it like goes offline, it has the ability to work. You just really need to make sure. What we're going to do is we're going to point the SIP server at our dev environment, our testing environment, so that there is still a possibility to authenticate patrons for overdrive and that sort of thing based on a snapshot of a recent snapshot, but it's not entirely up to date, but that's just a sort of stopgap. And so if your self-check machines can get to the internet and try to do things with the SIP server, it's not going to be recording those circulation transactions. So if you have a way to, completely disconnect them from the internet and they have some sort of functionality that allows them to operate and then sort of, that's wouldn't recommend it, but that's your call whether you want to do that. And that is the potential pitfall, that if they can get onto the internet and they think they're talking to the SIP server, they're talking to a place that isn't going to have those transactions recorded anywhere. It's going to be just dumped into a test environment that's going to be blown away at some point. So that's kind of our strategy to kind of make sure that people can still use Libby and authenticate for electronic resources and use PCRes, but it's sort of pointing to something that's not a live, active, valid thing that's keeping circulation transactions.
So we do have about 3 weeks between now and the upgrade. So, as we get closer, if you find that you have more questions, can absolutely kind of bring those to Basecamp and have a discussion there. I would definitely recommend playing around with Next and seeing what questions come up as you do that. There are, as I mentioned at the beginning, there are several smaller like bug fixes and things like that that are coming through that I didn't cover in detail, that are unlikely to, be immediately obvious, but there could be some functionality that changes that we're just not aware of what the wide-reaching effects of a very small change may be. But for the most part, I do think that this webinar has covered the things that you can expect to see that are different. But if you come across something that was not covered today that you think does make a difference, please feel free to post it in Basecamp. We want to make sure that nobody's surprised once the upgrade goes through. So we
Also, to want to promote our upgrade testing Basecamp group. Samantha, maybe if you can pull that up, that's something that we have that's specifically targeted at people that are interested in poking around and kind of seeing how these things work. And if you want to join this, if you go to the knowledge book and you submit a ticket, one of the tabs in the knowledge book ticket submission thing is add me to this Basecamp group, and we can if you go over here on the left, submit a request, and there's a mailing list. If in the top center tab, you can request to be added to different mailing groups or Basecamp groups. So we'd love to have other people there that aren't there already.
And if you have not used your library's test server before, let me just show you where you can find that information. So in the knowledge books under Evergreen Upgrades, there's this 1.1 testing the new version via the Next database. Just find your library, and then you just click on the staff login for it, and it'll take you right into where you can log into your library's Next environment. Llewellyn did some work to make the bar at the top blue, so you can tell you're definitely in Next and not the live production environment. So that's a nice visual cue for you. Yes, so if I am in the knowledge book and I come in here to the Evergreen Upgrades knowledge book, it's the bottom third or so of all of the knowledge books available. It's on chapter 1.1. And you can also, I think, if you just do a search for Next database, no, not even close to the top. It's in here under Evergreen Upgrades. So I definitely recommend asking for access to that updates message board and playing around in Next and seeing what you find, because you may discover as you attempt to do things that are part of your regular workflow, you may discover an impact from some of these changes that we hadn't considered. You may discover something that was a very small bug fix that has made your life much better that you're excited to share. And you may discover some new bugs. There are always new bugs with an upgrade. So we encourage you to test that out and let us know what you come up with. All right, well, we still have about 20 minutes left. I'm happy to keep this open if people do continue to have questions, but I think at this point, if you feel that you've gotten out of this what you came for, feel free to head on out, and I'll keep it open for a little bit just in case there are any lingering questions. But thank you everyone for joining us. I appreciate you being here. We do have the offline upgrade coming up next, or offline webinar coming up next week. just to kind of cover how to work with items in offline and then how to upload those if you're an admin after we go back online. So thanks for being here. Please keep bringing questions as we move closer to the actual upgrade, and we'll have some training afterwards and some different functionality that has come up as a result of this upgrade.